what they have to offer, if that makes sense. So it's a little different than at the undergraduate level, because at the graduate level, the expectation is you've done the research on the institution, you know precisely what you want to earn your graduate degree, whether that's a master's or a PhD in. So you really need to understand the research that faculty are doing so you can demonstrate that you can add value to the content of their own research. And for them to see, because in many universities, it's not an admissions office making the decision of enrollment at the graduate level. At the master's and at the PhD level, it's often the faculty. So they're looking to see how you can contribute to their own research. So I'm hoping that makes some sense for you, Zanita, because moving forward right now, it's more at the undergraduate level. So I want to make sure that you understand the differences as we go through these slides. Make sense? Okay, I'm going to get started then. So let me ask you in the audience, because I'm going to make this, like I said, very interactive to keep you awake and alert. Who do you think your audience is that reads your essay? Who do you think the universities use to read your essay?
What I personally think, it's probably someone from admissions office, but not necessarily, maybe some alumni or even student body council, or I don't know.
You're absolutely correct. There are over 4,000 universities in the United States, and depending on the philosophy of each individual university, it can be different. So it's not always just an admissions office. It could be students, it could be faculty. In our case, when it comes to awarding our full tuition scholarships, our vice president also assesses the list and reads. So that is part of the audience. How do you think we use your essay? Believe it or not, your essay helps us evaluate, if not just one, several of these components that you see on your screen. Sometimes a student, for example, is going to take an English language proficiency exam, and they may not have met an institution's minimum requirement score in writing. So the essay, if we feel that the student is a strong candidate, could be a tool that we use to supplement it. The opposite is true as well. If we see someone with a very strong writing component or reading component in the standardized test, but a very poorly written essay, we start getting concerned on the flip side as well. When you look at these three areas, are any of them surprising to you? Good, because assessing one's fit is key. Like I said to Zanita, at the graduate level, it's pretty much all about the fit, because faculty want to see that match. But at the undergraduate level, we're trying to see you above and beyond your grades. And for those universities that require a standardized test like an SAT or an ACT, it's the humanity piece of your essay. So that becomes really important to us as well. In today's workshop, we're going to talk about what you should do and what you shouldn't do in preparing your university essay. And this is, in my perspective, the most important piece. If there's anything you walk away with for an understanding, I want you to be clear on the types of essays that should be written versus those that shouldn't, and have a clear understanding of do's and don'ts. So let's start. Knowing your audience. We already touched upon how the essay is used and who your audience would be, right? We already said admissions people, students, potentially faculty and alumni. It's a group of people more often than not. But what distinguishes these admissions professionals from your peers, your parents, and your teachers?
That they do not know us.
Exactly. They don't know you. So you know how sometimes you can say something and your friends know what you mean, even though it might come across as racist or judging or condescending, or I could use a variety of terms, but they know you. So they kind of read between the lines and know what you mean, right? Your family knows what you mean. Your teachers know what you're trying to express if you struggle expressing, and your peers get the gist of what you're trying to say. That's a fair statement, don't you think? I know even sometimes I'll say something and I'm so blunt and I'm like, thank God I'm among my friends because they know that where I'm coming from. In a university setting, when you're submitting an application, we don't know you. You have to be extremely cautious of the word choice that you use and the subjects you choose to write about. Make sense? Okay. So we got the knowing your audience. Now I'm saying choose a topic that you're passionate about. Why do you think I say that? Why do you think I'm saying write about what you're passionate about?
Perhaps when we write about something we're passionate about, it comes across as natural. I would assume it comes like not synthetic. It's actually engaging to read and actually some kind of, in some way, comfortable.
And it's probably going to be your best work, right? Because you're not struggling on reading and write, or should I say, you're not struggling on writing what you think we as admission counselors want to read, right? Because that is the number one biggest mistake. Like I said early on, I've been in this career for 35 years. I read thousands of essays every single year since probably when I started really in my focus on admissions since 1992. So you can imagine, I've read a lot of essays. And at one university that I worked for, I used to get 50 applications a year. So I wouldn't be surprised if I haven't hit that million part yet of essay writing. So of essay reading. And a common theme that me and my colleagues see all the time is we can see in the quality of writing when someone was struggling because they were trying to write something that they thought we would want to read versus some of the best essays, and I have some fabulous ones here, are essays that someone wrote about what they're passionate about. And the quality of writing and the content were perfect. In addition to that, students write essays that are informative and teach us something, whether that's something about themselves that they want us to know about or something that they want to teach us about. Your audience, meaning us, admissions counselors, we all come from diverse backgrounds. We all have different beliefs. So you need to be careful on what you choose to write about, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. There are approaches in the classroom where you can write about things that are for a task in a classroom of study, but are inappropriate for a university essay, right? So choosing a topic you're passionate about. Why don't some of you tell me what you're passionate about? Don't be shy. It could be painting. It could be reading. It could be playing a sport, and I say that with reservation, playing a musical instrument. It could be a community service. What are some things that you're passionate about?
I am very passionate about sports. I train athletics, and that's just something that I'm really passionate about. And I think it's really important to have extracurricular outside of the school and education.
I agree. It makes you a whole person, right? Those extracurricular activities really show how well-rounded you are. And we'll talk a little about writing about sports in a minute. What other subjects? You could be passionate about a subject as well. And at the graduate level, that has to come across in your personal statement. So if you are passionate about a particular field, as you mentioned, Zanita, when it comes to IT, your essay better demonstrate that. Okay, so we know that we need to write about something that we're passionate about. I want to read you an essay that, because it's ironic, the example that I have is from someone who's passionate about information technology, right? So this is great. During my freshman year, which is the first year of secondary school, I was looking for a new desktop computer to replace my outdated late model machine. Technology had changed rapidly, and so had my computing needs. As I investigated the computers offered by the major companies like Dell, HP, Lenovo, and Sony, I realized that the pricing was very high for equipment that could barely accommodate me. So I decided to build my own computer. Now, early on, we talked about who reads these essays, right? So in this case, this kid was a borderline. Should I admit him or should I waitlist him? He was falling more toward waitlist because of his overall profile and the competitiveness of our institution. But then I read his essay and I wanted to share his essay with our faculty, and you'll see why. And it really changed our decision. So he proceeds to tell me, for months he did this research and researched components assessing functionality, performance, price, and quality. And over the time of 3 years, he started to collect these components. As he received all the components, he planned on how he would assemble like the case and and got started. He installed CPUs in the motherboard and mounted the motherboard in the case. Then he installed heat sinks and multiple hard drives and an advanced video card as well. So you can tell immediately that this kid is also a gamer. He had installed multiple fans for cooling. He customized cathode. He goes on and explains everything that he did in order to create this computer. He said once all the parts were installed and wired, he was ready to add programming. So now I learned already, all right, so not only does he have that mechanical engineering mind to create a computer, but he also has that mind to program one. And so he talks about his programming and creating some fail-safe techniques to prevent anyone hacking into it. He also made a shut-off temperature warning valve in case his computer gets too hot. It's not going to destroy the processor that he had built. And then he proceeds to tell us the first time he started his machine, it ran like a brand new top of the line machine. He also said not only was it the most reliable computer he himself had heard of, but it was faster and a 50% cost effective, meaning reduction in computer, than what you would find on the market today. And so while it took him 3 years to build it over time, it was better than what one would see in the market. And so, of course, I shared this with our computer science teachers because I'm not a computer scientist. I don't know the legitimacy of what he did, and it was very technical for me. So when I shared it with one of our faculty, he was like, oh my goodness, you're admitting this kid, right? Can I have his email? Because he thought of things that I would never think of. And I think he has a lot to contribute in the learning process. And I'm sharing this story with you because here's a perfect example of a student who was not going to get admitted, but based on the quality of his essay and our due diligence to verify the content of it, our faculty gave us a different perspective, demonstrating a passion that we need this kid in our class. Any questions? So you can see the impact of the essay. Often students will write essays about personal information, and I can't stress enough how careful you must be about writing about personal information. There's a fine line between what will benefit your profile versus what are inappropriate topics. It's okay to write about something personal as long as it's done, and this is key, both tastefully and purposefully. It has a value. So here's an example of a personal essay. I'm only going to read the first couple of sentences, and I'll tell you why, and then I'll summarize the rest. Death was imminent as I crawled into the hospital bed with her and remembered a time when I was younger, when my mother had been admitted to the hospital for several months of recuperation from the near-death experience of her bone marrow transplant. Every day I'd visit her and she would save me the apple juice box from her inedible hospital meal, and happily I would think that was the best part of my day. Now there was no apple juice box, no child's innocent, just my mother and I together for what I didn't know would be the last time. So here's a young lady who for several months neglected her studies because her mother was dying, and she chose to spend that time with her mother. Very personal. What she proceeded to tell us, which we would have never gleaned from a transcript, right? And we would have never really seen from a recommendation letter, was that while it appears that during this time frame, she didn't learn anything, it was quite the contrary. She learned about life, right? Because her mother was not going to be there for her high school graduation. She wasn't going to be there for her college graduation. She wasn't going to be there for her wedding, nor was she going to be there when she started her family of her own. So her mother was teaching her about life. And in that experience, this young lady realized that she did do a lot of learning. And what was missing were resources in her country to support youth whose parents were either terminally ill or so ill that they themselves not only had to raise themselves, but didn't have the tools to work through their needs, right? She was looking to come to Bentley, and this is all in her essay, because she says, I recognize I didn't do well. I want you to know that I learned, but this whole experience taught me that I need to open up a nonprofit to support schools and hospitals for people whose parents are terminally ill and they are youth and need the tools to survive. And I'm thinking, this essay has now allowed me to recalculate this young lady's GPA by taking out that semester's worth of grades. And I'm thinking, we're a business university. I can teach her the skill sets to open up a nonprofit, and she can achieve her goals to better serve citizens in the future in her country. This is a perfect example where a personal essay added value, had a purpose to better help an admissions team understand some blemishes in a transcript, but also see, getting back to that very first slide, the importance of fit. Any questions so far? Is this making sense? Do I get a head nod? Do I get someone to unmute themselves and say yes? Do I get a thumbs up?
Yes, everything is very much clear. Thank you.
Okay. Are you finding this helpful so far?
Yes, yes, very much.
Perfect. Okay. So I've read you a couple of examples so far. We know to choose a topic that one's passionate about. So keeping the reader engaged. I think this is going to be your hardest challenge. And I say this all the time because we read at Bentley anywhere from 40 to 60 essays a day. When I worked for a larger university, our minimum requirement would be 100 a day, and it could be more. If one is using a common application form, in addition to keeping us engaged, you also have length limitations, right? So it's going to cut off your essay at 650 words. So not only do you not want to bore us, but you want us to want to read your essay, whether it's the first essay we're reading that day or the last essay reading that day. So you want to keep us engaged. And to the best of your abilities, you need to do your best in A, answering the question, and B, keeping your messaging concise in the delivery so your essay doesn't get cut off. So I say be creative and have fun. You tell me, what do you think an opening line of an engaging essay might be? Do you want me to read you some examples?
Yeah, that would be nice and helpful.
Perfect. Okay. So this is probably one of my favorites. So I'll start off with it, but I have a few to read you. I hear noise all around me, honking horns, wailing sirens, and roaring engines, but they don't bother me. I actually enjoy them. Sensing them so near reminds me that I'm doing something good, something different, something courageous. What do you think this person's doing? How many of you are curious to know what they're doing? Let me see a raise of hands. Good. Anyone want to take a guess and unmute yourself and have a guess at what you think they're doing? They're riding a bicycle. In the country she lives in, they have single lane roads where somehow two cars are supposed to fit. Add a bicyclist to this mix, and she was an advocate of reducing one's carbon footprint. And we have a great major in environmental sustainability with business. And so she took it upon herself to start a national campaign that actually ultimately led to radio spotlights and television spotlights, because she hopped on a bike and would bike to school in these roads, and ultimately bike lanes were created. Riding a bicycle is a mundane topic, right? Some of the best essays are mundane topics because they're written so well. Would you like another example of an engaging essay? Okay. And let me remind you, these are how the essays start. They engage us to want us to read more. In calculating the distance of a trip to the other side of the world, one might typically consider the standard unit of measurement in kilometers or miles. I'm measuring my trip to the Philippines in a different unit, apple pies. How many of you are now curious to read and learn more? Exactly. What do you think this unit of measurement was? What do you think how they've used apple pies to measure the distance to the Philippines? Don't be shy, unmute yourself, take a guess. Remember, this is all for you. To date, rarely has anyone gotten it right.
Maybe they were using the diameter of the apple pie. I'm not sure.
Harris, that's what everyone says. I think that's a creative thought, but no, that's wrong. It was the sale of apple pies. See, there was a huge mudslide in the Philippines that wiped out an entire village and, more importantly, a school. So this young gentleman and his classmates, and I want to get the information right, went around and collected donations from vendors and supermarkets in order to have over 400 kilos of apples, 200 pie shells, 30 kilos of sugar, 15 kilos of flour, pie boxes, and an array of different spices. And they started to bake apple pies. And they sold these apple pies. And with the money they collected, 5 of them were not only able to go to the Philippines, but buy all the materials and equipment to rebuild a school. You wouldn't necessarily get that from the first sentence, but it engaged me enough to want to keep on reading and learn more. We also love creative essays and informative essays. Remember, I said, we love to learn. So here's an example of an informative essay that, remember in the beginning, it all comes full circle. I say, remember, you have to know your audience and you have to be careful what you write about. So let me teach you a little bit about me as I read this young lady's essay. It's entertaining, so it has engaged me. It's extremely creative in its opening line, and it's informative. I learned something. So here's an essay that checked all the points that we like to see. My dream come true would be to work for Walmart. Have you all heard of Walmart? Okay. That's what I tell people when they ask me what I want to do when I grow up. When I tell them that my dream, they don't even try to suppress their surprise. I see their jaws drop and their eyes widen. I have to tell you, when I first read this, I was like, you want to go, your dream is to work for Walmart? In the US, you don't even need a high school diploma to work for Walmart. So how is this your dream, right? So it created humor for me as the reader. And then she adds to that humor. Perhaps they imagine me as a Walmart greeter because of my bubbly personality and informing them about the sales. You can find tomato sauce in aisle 3 and pineapple juice you will find in aisle 7. My dream job, however, is a little higher up the corporate ladder. I want to be the next Margaret McKenna, chair of the Walmart Foundation. And I was like, wow. I had a misperception in just my first 2 sentences reading, but what does she have to say about Margaret McKenna? Margaret McKenna used to be my old boss 25, 26 years ago. And so she doesn't know her audience. If you're going to say something inappropriate about my old boss, don't you think that might hurt my perception of the person? We're all human, right? If I said something bad about your mother or something bad about your best friend, you're not going to really like me, especially because I don't know them, right? So this young lady doesn't know me. And I'm now even more curious because she's highlighted an old boss of mine. Informative. How many of you, and show me with a raise of hands because I did not know this, know that the Walmart Foundation has donated over or nearly $500 million to global charities? I didn't know that. So she's engaged me even more now. So now I know, okay, there's positiveness about Margaret McKenna, and this young lady is passionate about philanthropy. I learned something. It was engaging. It was creative. Shopping aisle greeter. She got me to laugh. And it was informative. These are the tools that we should aspire to incorporate in our essays in order to keep a reader engaged. Any questions so far? We're doing well. Any more examples needed? I'm limiting my examples. So, why do you think I say proofread? It's a given, right? So many people are dependent on spell check that they don't realize for could be spelled F-O-R, F-O-U-R, F-O-R-E, and then they could have in theory different meanings depending on the context they're put into a sentence. So spell check is key, and you cannot depend on software to catch everything for you. This is why I say it's really important to have someone else, ideally a teacher or your Education USA advisor, to proofread your essay. Now, if you're applying to universities that are common application universities, then it's one essay topic fits all, right? So don't make the mistake. And 10% of students applying to institutions in the United States through Common App make this mistake. And that's, they put in a university name. Well, we're Bentley University. We're not Boston College or Boston University. So how do you think I interpret your essay if I see Boston University instead of Bentley University? I think it's human nature. I think you're not really interested in us, right? That your real choice is this other university, and yet I could be wrong. So keep in mind that if it's a common application where it's one essay fits all, don't use the university name. Now, Zanita, it's the opposite that holds true for you because it's not a common application type form. You are choosing a university in particular for what it has to offer. So you need to do that additional research. And in the confines of your essay or your personal statement, because it's usually referred to as a personal statement at the university level, You want to highlight the accomplishments of that university. You want them to know that it's not one essay that fits all, but quite the contrary. It's a particular essay designed to fit that institution. So that's a complete flip. So here's my tip, and this is what I would recommend that you write down because I don't believe it's in my notes. When you write your college essay and it's time to proofread it, read it backwards. Why do you think I say that? Go ahead, Harris. I think that you're looking to unmute yourself. I'm not sure.
I wasn't, but like, do you mean literally letter by letter backwards or word by word?
Sentence by sentence backwards.
I don't have an idea really.
So let me ask you something, because I know I make this mistake all the time. How often do you type an email, for example, and send it out, and then you look back at it and you're convinced that you read it twice? I read my emails. I used to read them twice. Now I have to read them more than twice. And you're like, how did I make that grammar mistake? I proofread it. How did I make that spelling mistake? Oh my goodness, that sentence doesn't even really make sense in the context of the statement. Because when we write, we know the story, right? And we can read in between the lines, so we don't necessarily catch our mistakes when we read in the flow of a message. But when you read backwards, it's out of context, right? And you're looking each sentence individually, and therefore you're more apt to catch a grammar mistake or a spelling mistake because it's not flowing. Does that make sense?
It does.
So by reading backwards, it's actually benefiting the flow of your essay. So what to avoid or be wary of? I want you to keep these points at the forefront of your mind. But before we even start here, I really think it's important that I give you some advice. Because as we talk about the things that you should avoid, one that's not as blatant and yet is the most common mistake is students don't write about themselves. They often write about a third subject, AKA maybe my uncle, maybe sports. This is where the sports are coming in, right? And they are repeating content that you can find in an application or else telling me nothing about them. So this is point number 2. When you write your college essay, keep in the forefront of your mind, 75% needs to be about you, and 25% needs to be the subject, right? So when I gave you that example about the apple pies, that was really kind of the subject. When I gave you the example of the young lady whose mom passed away, that was the example. That was the 25% story. Everything else was the subject. So the 25% story, 75% about you needs to be in the forefront of your mind. So one type of essay that you should never write is a general essay. I had a young lady who wrote a young man, who wrote a very good essay, came to Bentley's campus, wanted to show how much they loved our campus. So they wrote an essay all about what they learned while they were at Bentley. Now, while the concept is good, me as the reader, I already know this information. It's my job to impart this information on you. So the only thing I learned about this student is that they memorized well and knew how to regurgitate, but I knew nothing about them. I knew nothing about their passions. With respect to the sports, I don't need to hear, and this is where we get into the cliche part of this subject, is we all know what a cliche is. It's a commonly repeated phrase. And when I see students write about sports, they tend to write about themselves, but how they got that winning goal, or their passion for playing field hockey. If you're going to write about a sport, I already know about that sport. I see it in your activities section in an essay. I see it if you update a resume, I see it in that section. I'm going to hear about it in your recommendation letters. So I want something new. So if you're going to write a sport, maybe you write about a topic like being on a team and how a team has allowed you to grow and evolve. And then this sport, whatever sport it is, becomes just one of many examples. It helps you avoid your typical cliche. It helps you avoid writing about a general topic, something impersonal, and helps us learn more about you because we need that 75% about you. So learning about you as a leader, learning about you as a team player, learning about how you may have challenged yourself in order to perfect a skill set is by far more important than hearing about the subject matter itself. I want to learn about who you are as an individual. I don't want a cookie cutter generic essay. Students sometimes will submit an essay that they wrote for an English class because they earned an A grade. Remember in the very beginning, the whole purpose of your essay is to see fit. We are not seeing fit in these generic essays. I have an example here of a cliche. And this is an essay I've used in this workshop since 2007 because I never read the essay. I stopped after the first sentence because it started in a cliche. And here you go. This year, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I'm sorry, people. At 17 years old, you don't know what forever is, right? I don't know what forever is. So how do you think this person could have written that statement differently that would engage me to continue to read as opposed to stop reading? Anyone want to give me an example? Why not just start with a decision? You're saying this year I made a decision that would change my life forever. A, you don't know what forever is. So tell me what decision you made and how it impacted you now, not 70 years from now. Does that make sense? I gave you an example of a cliche. I gave you an example of a general essay. What do you think an impersonal essay might be? I kind of gave you one as an example too, but what do you think another impersonal essay topic could be?
Maybe writing about a famous researcher or something like along those lines, and not focusing on yourself, but actually listing the achievements of that person.
Correct. Now that would be different at the graduate level, right, Sunita? Because you do want it still to be 75% about you, but you want to highlight a researcher at a university that you're trying to get into, so they can see how your aspirations complement their research. But at the undergraduate level, we're really trying to get to know about you. So often kids write about a role model, like their grandfather or a sibling. And I could tell you everything about their sibling and their grandfather or a member of their family, but I still don't know anything about you. It makes me want to have them admitted and come into my class as opposed to you. Make sense? Okay, we're almost done here, people. So, inappropriate and controversial topics. What are some inappropriate and controversial topics?
Probably politics or some too personal opinions that may not be.
Yep. Obsessions, sexual experiences. I am not a diary, and I can't tell you how many times I've received essays telling me about someone's first kiss or first sexual experience. Why are you telling me this? How does that help me admit you? Drugs and alcohol, you know, there's laws in the US. You can't have alcohol under the age of 21. So I don't want to hear about one's alcohol experiences. What are controversial topics? You touched upon one of them. You said politics. What are some other ones?
Maybe death of a close friend or a family member.
I don't know if that would be controversial. That would fall under personal, Harris, but it would impact, like that young lady whose mom passed away. If it has a purpose, and I learn more about you and your aspirations, you can write about that because it's not controversial. When I think of controversial, I'm thinking about race. I'm thinking about religion. I'm thinking about gender. I'm thinking about abortion. I'm thinking about politics. I'm thinking about ethnicity. I'm thinking even about divorce. There's certain cultures in the world that a woman will be stoned to death if she's divorced because of actions of her own, meaning infidelity. So you need to be careful. So when you're writing your university essay, there's a variety of essay prompts that you can choose from. I don't want you choosing the wrong essay prompt that leads you to write a controversial topic that could then impact your enrollment no matter how good the essay is. Let me ask you a basic question. Why do you go to school?
To get a proper education. That's
right.
one
So,
of the reasons.
Of course, you want to learn, right? Why do you go to university?
To learn.
Exactly. So if you write a controversial topic, you are no longer doing 75% you, 25% story, right? You are trying to change the opinion of a reader or let the reader know that your way is the right way and any other way is the wrong way. Not only are you not abiding to that 75-25% rule, but you're also closed-minded. That's what you're telling a university, that you're closed-minded. And therefore, why would we want you on our campus? We have so much diversity in beliefs, whether it's race, religion, politics, ethnicity on our campuses. We want to teach you to approach things with an open mind. We don't want to invite you into our campus if you are already set on an opinion that doesn't meet those learning goals. I see a hand raised.
Hi, Karen. Yes, it's Anya. I was wondering if there is a possibility that we wrap this up in the next 15 minutes. We are running.
Sure, I'm hoping that it will get wrapped up even quicker.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Sorry.
You're welcome. No wonder, no worries. So we talked about not writing a controversial essay, an inappropriate essay, which I have a lot that I can read you, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to. I can summarize if there's questions later. And I concluded by telling you about a persuasive essay. Writing your college application is not the foreground to convert a reader. It's just going to come off as being biased. And when writing that persuasive essay, you are closing doors rather than opening them. I can remember an essay about an illegal immigrant, during which a student expressed his extremely strong opinions on the issue and proposed a solution that assumed that the reader, if they did not agree, was just plain ignorant and wrong, and actually put that in the content of the email. An essay like that would turn the reader off. And remember about knowing your audience? My parents are immigrants. Now you know something about me, right? And because of the time of migration to this country, one of them wasn't theoretically legal for about 20 years. Well, my grandmother, I should say, because of the laws. Worked, paid taxes, did everything, but that's how long it took the paperwork. So I'm thinking, how can one say this? Closed a door. Because everyone's situation is different, and as objective as we try to be, the ultimate goal is not to bring anyone into the classroom or into an institution that could psychologically bring harm to others. I had an essay from a young gentleman who was obsessed with Britney Spears, to the point, first of all, inappropriate, right? To the point that the entire essay was written about how they only want to come to university to get a visa, to get into the United States, and then proceeded to tell me the bus route that they would take and the train route to get from Massachusetts to California to let Britney Spears know that he was in love with her and she should marry him. Now, definitely we see some psychological issues here. Definitely too personal, had no purpose, definitely inappropriate essay topic. But when I come down to basics, right? And let's just say that essay topic was a joke. Because academically, the student was among the top of his class, so clearly should have been admitted with scholarship. But quite the contrary, I had to take it for face value and think to myself, what if we have a young lady on our campus that's blonde that kind of looks like Britney Spears? How safe are the women on my campus if I enroll this gentleman? There's a question, I see a hand up. I'm not sure whose hand is up, but there's a hand up. So if you have a question, unmute yourself, or I'm going to keep on going because I'm down to my last couple of slides. Okay. So plagiarism. It happens more frequently than one can expect. And I want to stress to you, can someone define for me what your definition of plagiarism is?
Using others' work in your advantage or making someone do the work for you.
Absolutely correct. I could not have said it better myself. A lot of people think it's just using someone else's work and not recognizing it. Whether you're going to quote Thoreau, just make sure you know that you've given Thoreau recognition in your essay. But the other piece is having someone else write the essay for you. And that becomes more common than not. And I see it more and more with some of these private independent counselors that will write the essay. And honest to God, I had a student who applied early decision that I had to ultimately 8 months later, after they've signed a binding contract to come to Bentley and received a scholarship, I had to pull it all away because I discovered that another student months later applied again with the exact same essay. And it took me until July to figure out that it was an independent counselor that wrote the essay, and they didn't realize that these kids were applying to the same school and submitted the exact same essays. So it's considered fraud. When you submit an application to a university, the last thing you're doing is signing a document that's saying everything in it is your original work. And once we find that out, it isn't. So in closing, my dear friends, I don't want you stressing about writing your essay. Some of the best work are the most mundane topics, as you heard about riding a bicycle. And make sure that your essay is memorable. Any questions?
For the two of us, there is no questions. We want to thank you for the very profound presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did put my email address in the chat, and I will send the handouts. I hope you found this helpful and informative. And as I said, if you look at the handouts and you have any questions, please let me know. For those of you, like you mentioned, you like mathematics and economics, if you think that Bentley might become part of your list, my hope is maybe to get to your region following a forum that's taking place in Serbia in an Education USA event in November. So I'm hoping to maybe head to Bosnia and following that, but we can also do virtual interviews, and interviews add value to your application. So if it's something that interests you, I am the recruiter for your region. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I would schedule that with you at minimum virtually. Thank you so much for your time. Any other questions?
No, that's okay. Thank you very much and we will be sure to reach out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all found this helpful.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for the students that joined. Hvala vam što ste se pridružili. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And I hope we will see you at the next Education USA Bosnia and Herzegovina webinars. Karen, thank you so much. We'll be in touch, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully in November.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.